But all these things fit into the web of belief in one way or another. All the things that you think could be believed.
Yes. So I don't insist on checkpoints. All I am insisting on here is negative, namely no checkpoints except observation.
I see. Where did that leave ethics?
Out of science, but
not out of
in philosophy and in respectable philosophy.
And in what we might legitimately believe. Doctrines.
Well, in another sense of believe, yes.
It has been noted by many philosophers, yourself included, that there are points of contact between your thinking and that of American pragmatism. Explicitly mentioned, for example, in the Dewey lecture, some agreements you have with Dewey. To what extent was pragmatism an actual influence on you?
I think, well, it's hard to think of any. It's hard to think of any, and I haven't been clear in my own mind on what constitutes pragmatism and what separates it from epistemology, from empiricism. I've thought about various tenets held by various card-carrying pragmatists, James, Dewey, Peirce, and they seem to be far enough from each other, at least as far from one another as any of them from some non-pragmatists, as far as they're usually classified. So I've never considered myself a pragmatist, and that's where that misleading paragraph at the end of Two Dogmas makes all the difference, where I'm picking up Carnap's phrase that he applied to his frameworks as being purely pragmatic, unlike the rest of science, which is empirical, and where I say, well, yes, I agree with Carnap about the character of these of what he's calling the framework, but of course I'm questioning the difference between that framework and the rest of science, and I'm saying that it's just that my pragmatism is more thoroughgoing. I would apply it across the board. But as it turned out, was an unfortunate way of putting it. I was just using his word. I haven't been opposed to pragmatism. It's just that I've wondered just what is distinctive about it, and so I've never considered myself a pragmatist.
You mentioned Carnap's notion of framework. One difference between you and Carnap that's come over and over again in various guises in the years is your attitude toward natural language as opposed to constructed language. Carnap almost never wants to deal with natural language. He always wants to define his notions only for constructed languages, where you always seem to want to pull him back into consideration of what languages people actually speak.
Yes. Yes, because I think of those constructions as superstructures for one or another particular, generally local, temporary purpose. And I think of axiom or postulate as in effect an indexical, an indicator word, namely something relative to the particular project of pedagogy that one's engaged in. Here's the way he's organizing this lore that he wants the reader to master. He's putting it in this order and deducing these from those. Somebody might find an even more efficient way of doing it at the other end too, and that there's nothing intrinsic about those things. The artificial language, of course, if one thinks primarily in terms of artificial languages, then there's no problem about analyticity. What's analytic is are the axioms and their consequences. So what is the point of the artificial language? Well, it depends, of course, on what it's used for. But at one point, I presented this artificial example. A positivist, a logical positivist named Ixman, I thought of that name. Ixman is making some point about the meaninglessness of metaphysics, in which he some metaphysical he's claiming these things are meaningless, and his argument is that you could have all of science and all of our predictions and everything without any of these metaphysical questions even coming in. And to show this, at least with some examples, he says, imagine a tribe of Martians who speak a language of the following sort. And then he sets up an artificial language. He has to tell us a good deal about the syntax and vocabulary, but just certain parts, just the part that's going to make his point, apropos of this particular metaphysical sentence that he's taking the props out from under. So he lays down these particular traits of the language. Whenever these things, there are these sentences, when these are true, these are true, and that's all he needs to make his point. All right, there's an artificial language, and there's a perfectly clear sense in which we can say what's analytic and what isn't, what's in the framework and what is empirical outside the framework, namely what Ixman has laid down. But what was the significance of his laying it down? Well, in this example, we know exactly what the significance was, and it doesn't throw any light on a more general notion of analytic. And it's this sort of consideration that makes me has made me empirical in my approach or my criticism of these semantical notions.
Besides your naturalism or empiricism, perhaps they're the same thing, you've singled out as central doctrines of your philosophy what you call your extensionalism, and also your skepticism about meaning. Could you tell us something about what these doctrines are and how they relate to one another?
Well, essentialism is what's involved in saying that classes that have the same members, everything that's true of a class is true of any of a class that has the same members as that class. In that sense, therefore, they are just one class, not two. And that's the extensionalism. The core of it, that's the law of extensionality. In an extensional language, any two predicates are interchangeable without, if they are true of the same objects, interchangeable without disturbing the truth value of the sentence in which they occur. So that for an extensional language, therefore, there's no difference between a property and a class. Properties are identical for such a theory, such a language, if and only if they have the same, if and only if they're true of the same things. Therefore, you might as well call them classes, and I do. And thus I don't recognize properties. Well, that's that's really the whole of essentialism. But when good Lord, I mean of extensionalism. But an important consequence of it is that there's no difficulty in an extensionalist language or an extensional language, we can say. No problem about the substitutivity of identity. That is to say that if two terms are names of the same thing, two singular terms are names of the same thing and nothing else, you can put one for the other in any context anywhere, and again, the truth will be undisturbed. It's hard to make sense, really, of that law failing if the things really are identical. But when you get away from extensional context, that law does seem continually to be threatened. And that's one of the practical virtues of trying to maintain a completely extensional theory.